Colin Powell once said, "There are no secrets to success. It's the result of preparation, hard work, and learning from failure." And we couldn't agree more. This is Unleash the Champ Leadership Podcast. Unleash the Champ Leadership Podcast. We'll talk to people from all walks of life and pick their brains about their journey, the process, and the ups and downs to becoming successful. You want inspiration and motivation? It all starts here. This is the Unleash the Champ Leadership Podcast. And now your host, Kyle Sullivan.
What's going on, champions? Welcome to another episode of Unleash the Champ Leadership Podcast. Our guest today is an absolute joy to me, someone I've learned from through TikTok, through his online content. Dylan Schmidt is a seasoned marketing consultant, creative entrepreneur, headquarters in Los Angeles, California. He's a very active person who's passionate about helping people learn new skills, share their stories with the world. Dylan has helped podcasters, creators, and businesses bring their ideas and create impactful content that resonates with their target audience. One of Dylan's accomplishments is that digital podcaster is one of Apple's top educational and how-to podcasts. I can attest to the learnings on there. We can already link that in the notes. He's assisted podcasters and businesses from around the world in starting and expanding their message, long track record of success, and a lot of knowledge and expertise in the podcasting industry. Dylan, thanks so much for being on the show, man.
Thanks for having me, Kyle. I'm stoked to be here.
Absolutely, man. And before we hit record, man, this was a episode, and you're a guest, man, that I'm so pumped to have. And I've learned a ton before I even reached out through your TikTok and through your online stuff and your own podcast. And so, man, we got the bio, we know what you do, but who's Dylan behind the bio?
Who's Dylan? You know, I try to be like the same person behind the bio. That's like, but then when hearing you say the bio, I'm like, whoa, who's that guy? Because that sounds like a lot in, or responsibility to be a certain thing, you know? So me, Dylan, is just a guy living in Los Angeles, but really is just honored and grateful to be waking up every day and like truly living his purpose, living his passion, and sharing that with others and helping others be fulfilled like I'm feeling, because, you know, it doesn't always feel this way. And so waking up every day with that gratitude and being able to expand on that and share that every day is just such a gift. And so Dylan is grateful. That's one thing my bio doesn't say. I need to update that part.
Come on now, we'll put that in there. And that's that again, dude, shares so much of your heart that comes through your content. It's just a heart to help people and a gratefulness that, hey, I get to do this. I've not stumbled into it, but I mean, you're actively pursuing it. Where did this journey start for you, man? Like, I mean, there's a ton of folks in the podcasting industry. How did that journey go? And you land on, all right, podcasting is going to be the thing that I help people do.
Yeah, I'm a slow learner. And that probably is why I make stuff about podcasting exclusively, because there's a lot to podcasting. And if it took me so long to figure out certain things, I try to break it down real easy. So basically, during high school, I was like, I'm going to work in audio. Maybe I'll be in a band. Maybe I'll work at a recording studio. So right during high school, I kind of knew what I wanted to do as far as audio. And then once I got into the music business, I started working at a recording studio. I was like, this is not the vibe for me. Like the music industry, once I kind of saw what it was actually like, the reality kind of hit me and I was like, oh. So I had a mentor that helped me get into more business and kind of took me under his wing as far as like marketing and online business, Tony Robbins-esque type, and just loved it. Like loved just the passion and the excitement behind it. And so I actually worked on his podcast first. And so I was kind of combining these things that I had, gone to school for, that had been working on my whole life really with audio, and then doing marketing and online business, and then getting the chance to work on his podcast, and then combining all those things. Never did I think that I would do my own podcast or just like create content publicly around it until 2021 of June. I was sitting on the couch one day and was like, oh, I had this epiphany, just saying, this is what I need to be doing. why am I not? I wish I would have like instantly. I kind of knew like. Also, I was kind of like, why didn't I do this like 8 years ago? But better late than never. So, I used AI to like come up with the name, and I just started. Next thing I know, I created an Instagram account, and the feedback was immediate. Oh, this is great. So I had been doing things behind the scenes for clients the past few years, but never publicly. So then once I kind of got the name, kind of started like, I'm going to create this identity, and originally supposed to be like more of a business, not just me being the public facing person. But it just quickly turned out that way, where it's much easier for me to just do it myself. Kind of had to trick my brain there. No, I'm going to get someone else to do it. Next thing you know, I'm the only one doing it, and there's no one else coming. And I'm like, all right, well, here I am, like it's what I had to do. So it took me a few years to get behind the mic. And now that I'm doing it, I also want to help others get behind the mic too.
Yeah, man. Get behind the mic. There's so many, so many new podcasts. I think when I was kind of looking at starting my own, and there's like 3 or 4 million podcasts, but only, like 150,000 or 156,000 release weekly episodes. And so, man, talk to the desire or really the motivation of why should somebody want to go podcast, and what can they learn from it, and what kind of do these things to get started?
Yeah. So I'll use myself as an example. For one, when I started digital podcasts for my own podcast, or before I even started the podcast, just like I didn't know there was other podcast coaches or consultants. So I think I looked, but I don't know. I must have looked wrong because I thought I was like the only one doing it. And then very quickly I realized like, oh, there's multiple people out there doing it. That, I don't know how to say this word exactly right. Like naivete, the how naive I was actually like a good thing, because I didn't get bogged down with like, oh, there's all this competition or all this stuff out there. It was just me doing it because I had a genuine passion of wanting to do it. So more information wouldn't have helped me in that situation. And I think that's a good thing, although at the time, had I, seen all these different podcast coaches, easily I would have been overwhelmed and stopped. So that would have like literally killed my career, killed this whole thing that I look forward to every day, that I've literally put thousands of hours the last couple of years in. And so, also fast forwarding to today, like within the last week, I've been working on a separate podcast for myself that I'm doing. It's a narrative nonfiction podcast where I share stories, one topic an episode, and really excited about it. And I'm trying to find I'm doing a different approach this time. I'm hopping right into it, but I'm also looking at other podcasts as like inspiration. Not that I know that I won't get like bogged down by seeing another podcast, but I'm looking for other podcasts out there that would do it, that's similar to what I do. I can't find any. And I've looked pretty good. I even used ChatGPT and stuff. I'm like, what's a podcast like? I'll describe it all, and then I'll listen to the suggestions. I'm like, that's not what I'm doing. So, there's two approaches. It's like, one, you try to find all the proof you can that there's other podcasts out there, and then convince yourself that you shouldn't do it, and you just never do it, even though you want to do it, which that doesn't sound very productive to me. Like we can always find proof for something to convince ourselves to not do something. And then the other thing is, who cares if there's other people out there doing the thing, because no one's doing it like you. And if you're really looking for proof that hard that other people are doing it how you're doing it, then you're not actually finding the proof. Like you're just more focused on convincing yourself you shouldn't do it. So my advice is like, it doesn't matter if someone else is doing that. No one says the words like how Kyle says the words. No one, like it's not like, ChatGPT, any AI stuff can't like replicate what Kyle brings to his podcast. And the same goes for everybody out there. But the stick with itness of, what you bring to your show, the unique angles, the interests, all those things, is the most long-winded way of saying like, just hop in. You don't have to get married to it. You don't have to stick with it forever. But I think it is a fun thing for people to do, to express themselves and have great conversations.
100%. We talked about kind of my heart behind starting the podcast in the beginning was not to insult somebody that going, hey, can I pick your brain? But rather building an audience where it's a win-win of, hey, I'm going to learn from you. And also here's this audience, here's this, stage, if you will, that you can share your expertise. And so it's, and I tell folks, I started with my AirPods and a voice memo walking around my neighborhood. That's episode 0. The championship run starts. That was the title of it. It's about a minute and a half. So it's a real quick listen. Y'all go back and listen to it. But it's just, it's getting started. And I hear a lot of and just taking that imperfect action. You don't have to be overly produced. And I hear that a lot in your content of hey, here's what I use now, but here's some other options. And so I know a lot of people maybe have some hesitancy of going, okay, what's the barrier of entry? So talk to us about that. Hey, if you're going to start a podcast and you want to have that stick-to-itiveness that you spoke about, and you don't want to watch a whole bunch of people and you want to embrace being naive, because I do think that's an asset. What should they do, and how could they get rolling?
Yeah, starting a podcast can be deceiving because on one hand, you're like, we just talk and then we upload the conversations. Absolutely. You can absolutely do that. And there's no reason that you can't do that. On the flip side, though, almost every human I meet that starts a podcast wants to make it fancier and fancier. Sometimes before they even launch, which then holds them back because they're like, well, actually, I want to do this part before I do it. I want to do this part. But just like Kyle said, with recording it, use AirPods on a walk, that's perfect. I love that because it's true. You can always, improve and make small tweaks as you go. But I draw so many parallels between podcasting and business with, if you want to build a product that is released to the world that you sell, you are going to do yourself a disservice if you build it in silence and don't share it with anybody. But if you build it and get feedback as you go, you're going to be building an infinitely better product because you can build it as you go. The podcast, if it's an ongoing thing, doesn't need to be how it is on day 1 as it is on day 5. I've never heard a podcast that is actually the same, on episode 1 versus 100. It's so different. And whether it's your gear, there's the barrier to entry is so much lower. And so just doing the absolute, first step, which is recording on AirPods, into a voice memo, I'm all for it. We can get fancy into all of the different microphones and, effects and transitions. And I like to nerd out on those things because, there is naturally, as you want to learn more about it, just like anything, but at its fundamental core, it's having a message that you want to share, whether it's yourself or it's through, other people's stories, and then getting that out there. And it's really free in a way, if you think about it, because you could use AirPods, you could use Zoom, you could use Spotify for podcasters, which is a free hosting service, which is how your podcast gets distributed on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and things like that. It takes minutes to set up. It doesn't need to be a, whole big investment. There's people out there that will charge a lot of money to, get the podcast going. And, and there's a time and place for certain things, but at its minimum, it doesn't need to be some extravagant thing.
Yeah. And as someone that it was bare bones in the beginning, I'm like, oh, yes, cool. I did it. I did it right. And, it just was, I'm going to get it done and I'll adjust over time. And people have asked me, I don't have a super great mic but it's hey, it sounds good. I can adjust it and it's better than the AirPods I had in the beginning. And I kind of live in a fire ready aim mentality. It gives my wife whiplash often. But it just kind of is what it is. And so I love that. So when you're, okay, now somebody's got a podcast, they're going to come to you, man, and go, okay, I got something existing. Now, what kind of things do you do to help people expand their message, get more listeners, that type of stuff in the work you do?
Yeah. So really I like to break it down into 3 stages. Start, just getting it off the ground, which is its own thing of forming an idea and then bringing that idea to life. Then the growth phase, which is, okay, we've got the podcast going. Now, how do we reach more people? How do we grow our listenership? And then monetization. All right, we've got the podcast going. We've got listeners. How do we make some money with this thing? Because I do believe, while I do say that podcasts are free, at its core, you could start it for free. it still costs your time's money. So like monetizing a podcast, I think is vitally important to every podcast. Doesn't matter what your goal is with the podcast. It's like make money with it because it's not a bad thing to make money with your podcast. And so, yeah, so I help people in the different stages. I've found with the growth phase, when I am working with people, sometimes we have to go back to the starting phase of like, just because you've had your podcast going for a while, sometimes you kind of have to just like throw everything out the window and then just look at it from like a blank slate of like, all right, let's look at this again. Like, what are we doing here? And oftentimes a lot of podcasters are like, I just wanted to have conversations with people. I don't really know. I just, it's a fun way for me to network. Cool. But we need to at least get those down, like said out loud, written on a document, something like that, so that we can then use that to grow the listenership. Because, if we're going to find more listeners, attract more listeners, we need to know who we're attracting. And that all will stem from your core message and why you're doing what you're doing, so we can get more people who are aligned with that.
Yeah, for sure. And what do you see in how podcasts are changing? Because what I really love podcasts, but we're recording on video. I know you do a ton in the video space. How are you seeing that shift of how can we leverage podcasting more? Do we need to go to video? Should we be doing video? I feel like I'm going to know the answer to this, but our listeners may not. Where does video play in? Importance, not important, audio only? There's a whole lot of options that someone could do. What's your perspective, man?
Yeah, there is a lot of options, and hopefully I'll answer this in a way that you weren't expecting. But yeah, there are a lot of options. I like to play. I've been playing around with it. I've experimented also with different things. I've, heard feedback from clients and followers that have experimented with different things. There's a lot of things you can do. Video is awesome just because it gives you the extra leverage when it comes to repurposing your content. So if you're going to turn it into clips, you're going to put it on YouTube, anything like that. If you're going to repackage it to sell or something like that, you have the video component. People like to see other people. They might not watch the podcast. They might, how exciting is it to watch just two people talk the whole time? Sometimes, it's maybe, but for the most part, like people will just be listening, like audio kind of first, like leading with the audio. But there are just some things you can do with, the video that you get it. So depending on the type of podcast you have too, if you have like a business type podcast, it's like just do video, even if it's not great. Again, like imperfect is better than nothing. If you have like a more storytelling driven focus of a podcast, I totally understand not doing video. Like it doesn't need to be done. But I'm pretty much like at this point, I've come to the conclusion, like if you're doing any type of like business, consult, anything like in the education space, like just make it video. Doesn't matter what the video looks like, but just have it. And don't worry about making like yourself perfect on video. Just something is better than nothing. Myself, I've been like actually filming my own podcast, digital podcaster in vertical, and then just doing it almost like instead of publishing the whole episode on YouTube, just using that as clips. And those clips have done great. So I'm recording it with the purpose of making it into clips. And that has been kind of cool. But a lot of people experiment. One client also has, they'll record video. They don't post the whole video to YouTube. They'll just post clips, but they'll provide like a call to action or a link to the full episode. So those types of things help. But to me, it seems more work if you're going to do it audio only and then try to overlay some type of videos and things like that. It's like, your face is perfect. You can't get better than your face,
I love it, man. Can't get better than your face. We'll have to clip that one up, and you can use that one for sure.
We got to show your face, though.
Yeah. Where do you see podcasting going?
Oh yeah.
Like, where's kind of the future of what it can be and what it's turning into as someone that's in the thick of it?
Yeah. And I love futuristic stuff. So there's like stuff out there that kind of freaks me out with AI, and I'm very on the cutting edge of this stuff, but like it's getting crazy what it can do and sounds completely natural. Like there was an app I saw last week that You type in, it'll create a whole podcast. It'll speak the whole podcast for you. But that's not like, and it sounds like NPR level, like high quality. And could be, very critical of it. And I was like, this sounds good. I can't deny. But I think the future of podcasting will be more reliant on personality driven content. Just kind of how we saw with TikTok when that kind of blew up, like the more polished content didn't quite do as well on that as more just raw. I want to like see you who you are, kind of things like that. I think the same is going to happen with podcasts. Like we're just going to want more raw. And that doesn't always mean like unedited, because a lot of people will go like maybe the Joe Rogan route of like, I could just have a 3-hour conversation and people will listen. I would love that for everybody, but like the reality is probably not. Like very few people are going to willing to invest, especially if they don't know the guest, especially if there's not like a clear payoff for listening. But I do think that there is going to be something around more of a shift to just raw, real conversations where people that, we live in a age time where we're more connected than ever. There's more social media apps than we have probably friends for most of us. But at the same time, we probably feel a little bit more isolated, even though we can reach out to everybody. And podcasts provide that sense of connection for a lot of people. So I think part of that raw, unfiltered content is going to bring us back to more connection that we're probably desiring.
Yeah, man, 100%. And I think that's a great lead into another question I had of how can a podcast generate that community? How are some ways to drive them from listenership to community?
For most podcasts to generate the community listenership, if you're starting from zero, right? If you're starting like nobody knows who you are, like you don't have an audience whatsoever. To me, what I found to work best, and from what I don't always work with people who are just starting from absolute zero, because whether it's businesses, companies, brands, like if they're paying me, like they've already started really for the most part, or got the ball rolling. I try to provide content for people that are starting from zero, but because I've started there too, the reality is like you've got, before you can just post it and just expect people to listen, you got to go to where the people are and already having conversations, and kind of like being a friend, like if you want more friends, like what should you do? Like probably learn how to be a really good friend, And so if you want a community and you want to attract more people to a community that maybe you're building, one of the best pieces of advice I could give is just be a really good member of a community. Like engage with another community that you like, engage with people who you feel are like-minded and have similar interests as you. And like 10 times out of 10, I won't even say 9 times out of 10, because 10 times out of 10, if you are like a lighthouse in that community, people are going to be like, who's this person? I want to hang with this person. And this is coming from an introvert who is not like, the life of the party. That's not me whatsoever. But I have found a lot of success with just being that person who's engaged in others, and then others have become engaged in me.
Dude, it reminds me of, was it Jim Rohn's quote? Like you help enough people get what they want, you always get what you want. And it's like, man, just, you want friends, be friendly. You want a community, be in a community. It's so simple, but it's a powerful truth, man. Yeah. What you talked about your other podcasts that you're starting. What else are you excited about right now in life, business, podcasting, wherever you want to take that?
Yeah. Well, I'm in the process of moving. So setting up a new studio, which will be fun, and bigger space than I'm at now, which I'm looking forward to. But I'm excited just about kind of the future of just like social media and podcasts, because we live in kind of, this is like my career. So it's interesting times with AI and all these things. And so I'm really curious around like how people are using tools, how people are, using them to connect and do better, make themselves, better in all these things. But really I'm just like trying to help as many people as I can, break down the kind of like the confusion around getting started, and really just getting their own message out there, and just communicating better with themselves, with, guests on their show, all those different things. Like I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, and you do such a great job with it. I said in the beginning, and even before we got it, then I was watching your content, like there's very few creators that I like search to see if they've posted a new one.
That means a lot. That means a lot. Thank you.
And it's like, oh man, like I know Dylan's going to give some nugget. Like it popped up on the For You page at just such a pivotal time that I was like in the beginning stages of podcasts. I'm like, this my dude. Like this is the guy. And so I really appreciate your content, man. We'll link all of it to the show notes, but where else can people find you online, find out what you're doing and follow you along as they definitely should be?
Yeah. DylanSchmidt.com. And there's 80 million ways to spell that. DylanSchmidt.com. That's where I just put, it's my home base for everything. And thank you. That means a lot. And that I'm like so grateful and glad that we connected because your energy, like, and just your outlook is like infectious and it doesn't go unnoticed,
Man, I appreciate that. And let this be an encouragement to you listeners. If there's somebody you've admired, somebody that you've learned from, man, reach out because it was in a comment on TikTok that you're listening to this episode now. And so, man, thank you for being willing. Thank you for putting yourself out there. And we got one more question for you before we let you go. At Unleash the Champ Leadership Podcast, Dylan, what does it mean to be a champion to you?
First word that comes into mind is grace. I think when you're really trying to excel and be a champion at something, there's the peaks and the valleys along the way. And I think how nice and great you can treat yourself. And we all beat ourselves up of, I could have done this better. I could have done that better. But I think it's about how much grace we can show ourselves to continue pushing on. That really matters at the end of the day. Because who cares if you get to the top of the mountain and you're the champion if you're absolutely miserable in your own head once you get there. So I think the more we can treat ourselves with grace is at the end of the day, something that's really important.
100%, man. I like to say, if you get to the top of the mountain and no one's there to high five, you've missed it. And that's what you said there. Give yourself grace, folks. Thanks so much for the episode, man. You added value as I knew you would.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Unleash the Champ Leadership Podcast. Our passion is to talk to successful people and hear all about their journey and what it took to get there. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit up the website at unleashthechamp.com. Find us on Instagram at Kyle J. Sullivan and hit up that Facebook page at Unleash the Champ. Remember, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But by all means, keep moving.